After the injury to Ivan Pace Jr., the Minnesota Vikings have been linked to multiple free agents, and we're going to be talking about one in specific today that would be the perfect fit for the Minnesota Vikings while Ivan Pace Jr. is on the injury reserve, and that being Shaq Leonard, as you can see right there. We're going to be talking about him and his fit with the Minnesota Vikings, as well as we have a major injury update regarding Will Reichard and Andrew DePaola here in this video. Now, before we get into all of this news here in today's video, we know that 91% of you guys watching right now are not subscribed to the channel. If you're looking for a spot to get all of your Minnesota Vikings news, you are in the right spot. Hit the sub button, join us here on the channel. We're covering everything Vikings, and as we progress into a much surprising season for the Vikings, things are starting to heat up. And another one, we have the injuries kind of in a carousel right now, and we're linked and targeting former Defensive Rookie of the Year out of the Colts, most recently, of the Philadelphia Eagles, and current free agent Shaq Leonard. And this comes from a Bleacher Report article, and as you can see here, placed on the injury reserve with a hamstring in week 13. Ivan Pace Jr. will miss at least 3 more games. Missed last week against the Cardinals and missing 3 more. The early season return to his penultimate game of the season against the Green Bay Packers. And going on further into this article, Bleacher Report's scouting department has urged the Vikings to sign all-pro linebacker Shaq Leonard, who the Vikings showed interest in Indianapolis Colts released him in 2023. Now, Griffen, I think this is an absolutely fantastic signing. Before we kind of get into the depth of kind of who Shaq Leonard is, what kind of player he is, but we immediately saw the gap that Ivan Pace Jr. left against the Cardinals. We saw Kyler Murray be able to kind of control the middle of the field for, I'm going to say, majority of the game, if not all of the game, and that's a concerning part about what the Vikings are going to be progressing with. We know that they're going to be coming up against some very tough teams down the stretch, and especially come playoff time, the Vikings are going to need to be able to solidify this, and we've seen Ivan Pace have a few injuries in this season, and it's kind of concerning to see him out for, a second stint. This is the first time on the IR, but a second stint. I think Shaq Leonard is a perfect backup for the time being right now, and a backup as well for Ivan Pace when he does come back. So what do you think about the potential Shaq Leonard signing?
I think it's very appealing. I think Minnesota has clearly shown interest in him before heading into this season when the Colts released him. I know he's kind of taken a bit of a fall off, and we're going to touch on that later. But on paper, it does seem like a very good sign because against the Cardinals, we really struggled against Kyler Murray. And as the season goes on, we're going to go against more and more quarterbacks that have more mobility and can escape the pocket and can burn us with their legs. So we have to make sure that we can hold that down. And as well as just over the middle in general. Ivan Pace was a great turnover machine for Minnesota. He's been able to create opportunities for them and get them turnovers when they've needed it, or just punching the ball out or getting a tackle for loss. So that's going to be a big hole to fill. So getting a guy there that is a former Defensive Rookie of the Year, he has production. He has shown that he can play the game very well at that position and at a high level. So if Minnesota can continue to do that and have those guys on defense where it's just next man up, but make sure they can rise to the occasion, definitely go out and get a guy like him, because as we go on this season, teams aren't going to get any easier. It's going to get more and more tough, especially when we go into the final 2 games that are against Green Bay and Detroit. Hopefully we do have pace back for those final 2 games, but that stretch until then, as far as keeping pace with the Lions, making sure that we run the table, that's going to be very crucial, and going out and getting Leonard is a big part of that.
Yeah, exactly. And as you mentioned, with kind of the quarterbacks being able to scramble on the inside, especially run-first quarterbacks, even if you're not a run-first quarterback, we've been able to see what Kyler Murray, who was a very good scrambling quarterback and improviser, can do. But that also means that, people or quarterbacks who really aren't known as scramblers can get those extra yards they may not be able to get elsewhere with Ivan Pace out. So it really does seem like a signing needs to happen, especially with a few stats of the backups of what we've seen in his absence and kind of the lack of skill they have as Ivan Pace. I don't want to say they're bad players, but Ivan Pace is just a special player in a special defense right now with Brian Flores. And looking at this, Leonard will become an upgrade over Grunger Hill, who played the Lions' share of alongside starter Blake Cashman, a newcomer Jamin Davis, and 2 linebackers posted the lowest defensive grade on the team by Pro Football Focus, logging 38.3 and 26.1 respectively. And that is really, really bad for those who don't know, for those who don't really get the idea of PFF. So having Shaq Leonard, who has, as you mentioned, not really had the best of most recent seasons, but former Defensive Rookie of the Year, All-Pro, Pro Bowler, so many kind of accolades that he has already, and only at 29. This is someone who the Vikings at least need to look at, need to go in contact with. He has said that he's considering retirement. He's, if he wants to come with a team, but if no teams reach out, he's perfectly fine with retiring. So it really does seem like to me that, that's kind of a plead for a team to at least come and contact him in some way. Whether that is going to be the Vikings or not, we hope so, because, as we mentioned here, the gap that Ivan Pace left was something that we cannot have against some of these upcoming teams like Green Bay, like the Lions, even like Chicago. Though, the NFC North, we cannot afford to have some brutal losses and some brutal kind of mishaps in the middle of the field with a few backups in place. And I did want to pull up Shaq Leonard's stats before we kind of go into the injury update that we have here. And as you see, the injury to Shaq Leonard in 2022, when he only played 3 games, played 14 the year after, and then went to be released by the Indianapolis Colts. Before that injury, he was an absolutely fantastic player. And obviously, an injury is definitely going to take a big hit to your career, but we know the way football works, especially the way the NFL works. If you get injured, your spot is gone. You're not going to be saved for a while like we've seen in other sports. The fact that you get injured, you're replaced, and then you're kind of taking a back seat and kind of forgotten about definitely sucks. And I think that was kind of what Shaq Leonard is a victim of. And I really don't want to say that he's at the point of retiring in his career. The 29-year-old defensive rookie of the year, what we've seen from him in the past is still in there. And I still believe that he could be that player once again, and especially with Brian Flores. So, Griffen, how would you see Shaq Leonard kind of bouncing back from, of course, the injury, but also the few lackluster seasons over the previous 2?
Yeah, I think the numbers kind of speak for itself. And the NFL, like you said, when players get hurt, your job isn't guaranteed. We've seen that with the likes of Tom Brady, Dak Prescott, and some others. So with Ivan Pace Jr., of course, when he comes back, his job is probably going to be secured. But if Shaq Leonard is there to kind of fill those voids, that's a really good gap filler to have, especially when, like you said, these teams that we're going up against are teams that we should be beating. Chicago, Arizona, all these other ones. We were able to get by Arizona just barely, but that's a game that we should have won convincingly. And had we had Pace in there, we probably would have came away with it a little bit easier. Probably wouldn't have been a blowout like we wanted it to be, but it probably would have been a lot more of a gap than just 1 point. But Ivan Pace, again, big gap to fill. Shaq Leonard is that person who can be the difference maker for this Minnesota Vikings defense. As far as bounce back, it's as simple as if he signs them, first game he gets a sack or a pick or a forced fumble. That's a big swing for his confidence going forward and getting him back in the swing of things, especially when he's a player who, like you said, he's fine with retirement. But if a team comes knocking along and has a chance to go out and get a ring and just have a great story added to it, what better team than the Minnesota Vikings, where we weren't expected to do much this season? We're 10-2. We weren't expected to be where we're at in the division. We're second in keeping pace with the Lions and have a chance to just keep pace with them for it to be worth all the marbles on the final week of the season. So if Shaq Leonard can come in there and bolster down that linebacker core until Ivan Pace comes back, that would be perfect. And it also opens up the opportunity of utilizing him into other spots as well in that linebacking core if there's another injury or if someone starts to falter a little bit.
Yeah, and that's a good point as well, is that Shaq Leonard definitely, considering retirement, of course. If he's happy with it, that's totally fine. But if you see a team like the Vikings, who are 10-2, working their way towards a playoff spot and seemingly not slowing down anytime soon, with a defensive coordinator like Brian Flores, I really don't see a reason why he would want to stay home with that. That's definitely something enticing, knowing that you could have the option of kind of reinvigorating your career and getting that back into pace. And whether or not Brian Flores does stick around as the Vikings defensive coordinator, this Vikings defense is definitely going to learn a lot from him. And as you mentioned as well, the injuries that could happen elsewhere on the defense, hopefully there are none. He is an experienced linebacker that can kind of float around that side of the position, and really wherever he needs to go, he can find the success there at that point. And I do think that there really is no loss to the situation, and the Vikings, at least, as I mentioned, need to entertain this before we kind of get into some trouble at the linebacker position, especially with Ivan Pace being out for at least 3 more games. But we do have more injury updates regarding this. Unfortunately, not Ivan Pace, but we do have some pretty big ones that we've been missing in some pretty important special teams players. DePaola and Will Reichard, both of these guys are open in their 21-day practice window, and we do have a pretty exciting update, I guess we could say here. Finally, we have this. Both Reichard and DePaola have their 21-day practice windows opened this week, and they've now missed a minimum of 4 games on the injury reserve, which could be in line to return to game action as soon as this week. Now, going on top of that as well, Kevin O'Connell said this: get them into some work together and see where those guys are as we move forward through the week. And also goes on to say that we could potentially see them as early as this week. Now, John Parker-Roma has been playing absolutely fantastic. I think there's no doubt about that. You got to give credit where credit is due. However, I still think that I want to see Reichard back, with no doubt. Seeing John Parker-Roma being able to drill those kicks pretty consistently, seeing his first over 50 made at 55 against the Cardinals, there was some more nerve still there for me. And probably not for Parker-Roma, but for me, there certainly was. And I'm happy that he's holding it down. I'm happy that he's finding that success there. But the fact that we're still not 100% sure about it. We haven't seen his true limit on his leg, but we have seen Reichard. So, the updates are fantastic. Good to see these two back, but I think we've kind of earned that position, and John Parker Romo as well has earned the right to be able to stick around until we actually have Reichard healthy enough to come back without having the risk of re-injury. So, Griffen, I know that we're all fans of Will Reichard here. What do you think about this injury update that we have today?
Great to see that he's had his 4 games up. They kind of went by really fast, and the reason why it went by so fast is because John Parker Romo has been holding it down between the uprights. Again, we haven't seen too much from 50 yards out. We just saw the one opportunity. But again, having that confidence when Reichard goes out on the field, that is what we like as Vikings fans. We don't want to go out there and have a repeat of Blair Walsh or Gary Anderson after a perfect season messing it up all in the playoffs. It goes to show that no matter how good your kicker is or how weak your kicker is, if you're a Vikings fan, you're always going to be nervous when they go out there, but you're going to be a little less nervous when Will Reichard goes out there versus John Parker Romo. However, not to say he hasn't been great. He has really been really surprising. Not what I expected, at least. When he came in, I was really worried, okay, we're just going to go for 2 for 4 weeks or just go for it on 4th down instead of trying to take a field goal. But he's really come in and really kind of helped really give more confidence to this team and really has helped us win games a lot more than he probably was intending to or thought he would be. He was in a position where Jacksonville, he won us the game. Arizona, he helped win us the game there with big kicks. Chicago as well, he was able to just keep us just padding that lead. So there's a lot of things there where Minnesota is in a situation where we have a lot of injuries, but we have a lot of guys that are filling that next man up mentality. It's almost like what the Patriots were doing back in the day where it didn't matter who was at the position. If they got injured, you had that guy there that was reliable to step in there at the replacement position.
Yeah, I agree. As you mentioned, the Vikings kicking has been a bit of an issue in the history and in the past, but the fact that we're seeing some consistency without Will Reichard, the guy that we went out and drafted in John Parker Romo, and although he may not have too much time left with the Vikings, I think he's secured himself as a potential permanent NFL kicker with his recent performances, and hopefully he does find success or continue to find success as well, and hopefully we do see him again, this week as well, because I don't think we want to rush Reichard back. We want to get fully healthy, and as I mentioned, John Parker Romo has at least earned my trust right now. Still some nerves beyond 50 plus, but even hitting at 55, pretty confidently last week. I think we're going to see a lot more of him at some point in the NFL. But, that's all we got in this video. Griffen, you got anything else before we finish this one off?
Can't wait to head into the next week. I know we went through 2 heart attack games. Hopefully this next one comes a little bit easier. But again, no win is easy in the NFL, but they don't ask how, they ask how many, and that's all that matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores are ready to keep this team going. Looking good so far on, as you mentioned, a few nervous games, but now we're kind of got those under his belt. We're getting used to those now, and as we progress further to the playoffs, we're going to have a lot more fun with this team. But that's all we got. If you did enjoy, give it a like, hit the sub button as well, but we're signing out. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.